It is the 5th of June 1992. Dan Quayle, the Vice President of the United States, is visiting a primary school in Trenton, New Jersey. Quayle has been asked to judge a spelling bee and asks a 12-year-old student to spell the word potato. The student correctly spells it, potato, but Dan Quayle tells him that he has missed a letter, then instructs him to add an E at the end, spelling it potato.
Think of potato, how's it? So, you write phonetically, put up, there you go.
There was widespread derision of Quayle. Later that year, President Bush lost the election to Bill Clinton. Quayle should have paid attention to the words of Lord Chesterfield, who wrote in 1750, "I must tell you that orthography is so absolutely necessary for a man of letters or a gentleman that one false spelling may fix a ridicule upon him for the rest of his life." Did having a running mate who couldn't spell potato contribute to Bush's defeat? Well, there are many factors involved, but having a gaffe-prone vice president didn't help. And it certainly scuppered any presidential ambitions Quayle may have had. I remember the incident well, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that I found it funny. Well, yes, it was funny, but at the same time, I felt a deep empathy for the man. How many native speakers have had embarrassing spelling mishaps? A lot, and it's not just intellectual lightweights like Dan Quayle. Ernest Hemmingway's draft novels were littered with mistakes. Loving became loving like this, and moving was spelt like this. And he wrote definite as like this and criticism like this. When his editor confronted him with these errors, he shouted, "Well, that's what you're hired to correct." Jane Austen was bad at spelling. She wrote scissors like this. Nabokov couldn't spell questionnaire. Tony Blair misspelt tomorrow as tomorrow 3 times in a single letter. F. Scott Fitzgerald was a bad speller. So was George Washington and Winston Churchill and me. I'm an English teacher of many years, and let me confess to you one of my many embarrassing teaching moments about spelling. I wanted to explain the phrase "I can't bear it" to my students, but while I was writing on the board I thought, hold on, B-E-A-R, that's not right, that's a big hairy animal. So I wrote "I can't bear it," B-A-R-E. And this was a beginner's class, and it was still pointed out by a student with basic English, much to my embarrassment. That was my Dan Quayle moment. And actually, I'm finding this quite cathartic, telling you about this right now. And perhaps you have had a similar experience. So do share your Dan Quayle moment in the comments. And while I'm here, I thought I might add another few spelling traumas that I've had over the years. See if they resonate with you. How do you spell fulfill in British English, that is? Well, it's F-U-L-F-I-L. Does that make any sense? Even though full is spelled with 2 L's and fill also spelled with 2 L's. That's ridiculous. And in a business meeting once, I spelt Sweden with 2 E's. Sweden. Well, in my defence, that's how they say it. Sweden. Affect and effect. I know the difference, but when you're speaking, they're both pronounced as effect. So I always have to think about it when I'm writing. And also every time I write the word stationery, I have to remember if it's E-R-Y or A-R-Y, because there are 2 words pronounced the same with different meanings. I still have to look it up every time I spell the word, and even the spell checker doesn't help with that one. Before we continue, I'd like to tell you about Saily, who has kindly sponsored today's video. Now, I'm currently traveling around Asia, and having a local SIM when you travel is so convenient. Saily is an eSIM which provides me with secure internet anytime, anywhere, and which means I don't have to seek out cafes or rely on public Wi-Fi or pay expensive roaming charges. Saily is easy and affordable. Just download the app, install the SIM and get a data plan. It will activate automatically the the moment you reach your destination. And it doesn't matter how many countries you're visiting, you only need to download the Saily app one time and you're good to go. If you're traveling for a week or 6 months, if you need just 1 gigabyte or 20 gigabytes of data, Saily has a plan that suits you. To get an exclusive 15% discount on Saily data plans, use the code LetThemTalkTV at checkout. Download the Saily app or go to saily.com/LetThemTalkTV. Thank you for Saily for kindly sponsoring this video. So let's look at why English spelling is so illogical. Some would say ridiculous. And you would have thought that the Academy of the English Language would have fixed it by now. What's that? There is no Academy of the English Language? Oh dear. I should point out though that despite the large number of irregularities, it's a misconception to say that English has no rules about spelling. That's not quite true. About 70% of English spelling follow spelling rules, even though these are, for the most part, bloody complicated and often require a knowledge of etymology. So, for example, the English CH can be pronounced ch, as in church, and chief, and that's from either Anglo-Saxon or Old French. If it's a k, usually it's from Greek, such as chaos and architect and chorus. Or if it's a sh, then the word probably comes from modern French, such as chic or machine or chateau. One much quoted example that is supposed to demonstrate the craziness of English spelling is this word, which it is said could spell fish. F as in the GH in enough, I as in the O in women, and sh as in the TI in nation. It's a funny story, but it's not true. It's impossible to have a GH representing an F at the beginning of a word, and it's impossible to have a TI at the end of a word spelling sh. It is true though that there are a lot of irregularities, but why? In order to understand, we need to go back more than 1,000 years. It's 596 AD. Pope Gregory sends St. Augustine and 40 missionaries from Rome to England. Their aim is to convert the Angles and the Saxons to Christianity. He has a meeting with some English monks. As well as being monks, they are the country's scribes. They were basically the only people who could read and write at that time. The conversation goes something like this. We're on a mission from God. Okay, Mr. Augustine. Your language, Anglo-Saxon, how are you writing it? It's like this. It's called the Futhalk. Aren't they beautiful? I spoke to the Pope and he doesn't like it. We want you to start using this instead. What? Can't you see it? Over there. Oh yeah, very interesting. It's the Latin alphabet. Okay, but it's not going to work because Latin is a different language from Anglo-Saxon. You have different sounds. What about the th sound and the a sound and all that stuff? We have it and you don't. I'll tell you what, you can start using the Latin alphabet, but we'll let you have 4 letters from your Futhalk. These ones. It's a deal. But why are you wearing glasses? They haven't been invented yet. So the Anglo-Saxons adopted the Latin alphabet with 4 extra letters. Thorn, a voiced th in words like this and that. Eth, an unvoiced th in words like think and thanks. Win, for the W sound. At that time, the Latin alphabet didn't have a W. They'd either use 2 V's or a double U. Yes, we'll get onto that later. And then there was ash for the a sound in words like ash and cat. And on the whole, it worked pretty well. It wasn't perfect. English had a lot more vowel sounds than Latin, so they ended up using the same vowels for different sounds. For example, good and God were both spelt G-O-D. Usually though, from the context you could work out the meaning, and Anglo-Saxon also had a much smaller vocabulary than does modern English. Now the next big change happened in 1066 when the Normans invaded England, and for the next 300 years the ruling classes of England spoke a dialect of French known as Anglo-Norman. English was still the language of the peasants at that time, and if you were English but you lived in a city, one of the few people who lived in a city such as London, which had a population of around 15,000 at that time, that's in the 12th century, then you'd certainly learn French. And French landowners might learn English to speak with their peasants. And in this way, lots of French entered the English language. And it's estimated that 41% of the words in the English language today have French origins. And this excludes the 15% that comes from Latin. And I made a video all about that here. Do check it out. And after 1066 until the 14th century, there are very few works written in English. Most of the administration was in French or in Latin. All we do know from that period is that the English scribes were adapting the Latin alphabet to take into account the sounds of English. For example, a 12th century work written in Middle English by a monk called Orm started adopting some spelling conventions that we still use today. And during this Middle English period, English writing was increasingly being carried out by French trained scribes. Remember that Anglo-Norman French and Latin were the dominant languages in England until well into the 14th century, so those writing in English would be heavily influenced by that. It's 1300. A French scribe is preparing a document in English. I'm on a mission from Paris. You've adapted the English language to the Latin alphabet, I see. Yes, we've added a lot of new spelling conventions. So for example, you can make a short vowel by doubling a consonant. Write, written, ride, ridden, you see. And if you put an A in a word, it becomes a long vowel. So pan, add the I, and it becomes pain. Ran, add the I, and it becomes rain. Brilliant, just brilliant. You can keep those spelling conventions, but what I want you to do is, when it comes to words of French origin, we want you to spell them the French way. What? Peasants like this, not like this, please. And while you're at it, can you change some English words to make them more Frenchy looking? The CH for the ch sound. Child, like this, not like this. Hus, with an OU, because as you know in French, the OU is the U sound, and we say hus, and we say mousse, so it should be spelled like this, not like this. No, but these are English words, and they are written as they sound. I don't care. And one more thing, those funny characters that you use in your alphabets. Thorn, F, ash, win. Get rid of them. Oh dear. So that's what happened. There were some solid pronunciation rules, but these were often overridden by French spelling conventions. The letters from the Old English alphabet mostly got dropped, although thorn hung around for a while and was used in the first editions of the King James Bible in 1606, but then died out soon after that. Win eventually got replaced by a W. So French spelling conventions are everywhere in modern English. Why are TION words not written as they are said? Nation should be spelled like that, shouldn't it? Figure should follow the logic of the English scribes and be spelt just like trigger, but French spelling trumped English convention. Fruit, that's how they spell in French, but in English it should be fruit, surely. And why do English words that should start with an S start with a C, like centre, circle, city? That's French spelling. The GUE at the end of a word is French. Tongue was once spelt like sung, but the French scribes changed it to tongue. The U and the E at the end are completely superfluous. Therefore, a large part of the English language is written using French spelling conventions, and sometimes Latin and Greek. but we'll come to that in a moment. But let's return to the scribes. Matching the sounds to the letters was not the only problem. Remember that the printing press didn't arrive in England until 1476, so everything was written by hand. And this is a document from that time. Can you read it? No, but the thing is, neither could they, or not so easily. And here are some other problems English scribes had. Look at this page. See those vertical straight lines? They are called minims, and some letters written by the scribes look remarkably similar. The U and the V and the I and the M and the L and the N were basically just vertical lines at that time. So scribes developed techniques for distinguishing the words and helping the reader. That's why love is spelt with an O and not with a V, because a U next to a V is confusing. They both look the same. It looks like a W. Love would look something like this. Can you read it? And that's the same with glove, above, honey, wolf. That's also why there are so few words in English ending in I, except ski and khaki and a few other foreign words. The scribe preferred a Y, like sky and try and fry and cry, because they were easier to read. And it explains why there are no words in English with a double E, except skiing, which is a lone word because the medieval scribes didn't go skiing. You know why? Because there are no mountains in England. If a word ended in a U or a V, they would just add an E to avoid confusion. And that's why you get love once again, and above once again, and blue and true and glue, tofu, not tofu. Medieval monks didn't ski and they didn't eat tofu. Even though these problems could be solved when printing came along, they were never resolved. So today we still spell many words in a way that were designed to help out 13th century readers reading handwritten manuscripts written on parchment. When we are reading today on our smartphones, it's no problem reading love, L-U-V. Some people do write like that, and praise be to them. That's how we should write it. We've now reached the moment in our story when the printing press arrives in England. It is 1476. William Caxton returns from the continent. Hi, I'm back from Bruges, and I've got something that's going to change the world and make us a fortune. What is it, Bill? It's called the printing press. Okay, good. Tell me more. We're going to print books, thousands, maybe millions of them. No, we can't afford that. Do you know the hourly rate for a scribe in the late 15th century? You don't understand. We don't need any scribes. It's a machine, and it will print everything. All we need are these metal type pieces, one for each letter, number and symbol, and we'll cover them in ink and then slam them against the paper. Ba-ching! I don't know what you're talking about, but it sounds amazing. Yeah, we're going to have to fix the spelling though. These days people write words however they sound. That's not going to work with printing. There would be chaos. We need rules, spelling rules. Fix spelling, you say? Well, mostly. I mean, I don't care that much. I'm a businessman above all, but let's try it. Except, of course, when we need to justify each page on the right-hand margin. So if there's a space at the end, we can either alter the spelling. So, for example, ship can also be spelled like this or like this. Pity can be spelled like this or like this or like this. Okay. Yeah, one more thing. This printing press is from Bruges and it doesn't have a thorn, so no, that letter has to go. What do we do instead? Either a TH, or if you want to save space, it can be a Y. I mean, it looks a bit like a Y nowadays anyway. So the can be spelt like this, Y-E. But that looks like ye, which means you. No, this one means the, as in the old pie shop. Don't worry, nobody will mispronounce it. So before the printing press, people spelt things out as they sounded, more or less. And the trouble with that is that it meant that each accent would have different spelling. In fact, you can find scribes spelling the same word in several different ways on the same document. Caxton based his spelling on the accent of the East Midlands. By the way, the definition of the East Midlands is a bit confusing. For me, the East Midlands is Derby and Leicester, but historically and linguistically, it extended much further south, covering Cambridge and parts of Middlesex, which stretches into modern-day London, as you can see from this map. So printing did a lot to standardise the spelling. That's great, isn't it? But what could possibly go wrong? The Great Vowel Shift. The Great Vowel Shift was a series of pronunciation changes that happened in English roughly between 1400 and 1700. Many long vowels changed their sound. It greatly increased the number of irregularities in English spelling we have today. Stone used to be pronounced storn, but now it's stone. About house, moose, out became about house, mouse, out. Why don't moon and book rhyme? The GVS. Or blood and food? The GVS. Why don't great and meat rhyme? The GVS. Why are C and C pronounced the same? The GVS. I should point out that the Great Vowel Shift more heavily influenced the pronunciation in London and the south of England. If you go to the north of England and to Scotland, you'll find many examples of words that were less affected by the GVS, and some pronunciations are the same as they were in the 15th century. For example, in the south of England we say boat, but in the north you'll still hear boat, a pronunciation which predates the GVS. In addition, other consonant sounds were becoming silent, but the spelling remained the same. That's why night is spelt K-N-I-G-H-T, because that's how it was pronounced, Knicht. In should and would, the L was pronounced. Not could though, that L was added later. In answer and sword, the W's were pronounced. Answer, sword. Gnor was pronounced like that. Now it's nor with a silent G. The W was pronounced in right, werita. Laugh was loch, night was nicht. And this partly explains why the OUGH has so many pronunciations, but this requires another video all on its own. So the sounds changed. Okay, big deal. In the next section, we're going to look at the attempts to update the outdated spelling. Oh dear, there weren't any. So many of the words that we spell today were correct in the 15th century, but they're not now. But we don't stop there. English spelling was to go through the sausage machine once again. During the Renaissance, a great number of new words were entering the language from Latin, Greek and French once again. But that's not all. The lovers of all things classical poured their beady eyes over English spelling and didn't like what they saw. They felt it needed improving. They had this notion that words should reflect etymology. No, what's this? It's the word debt. Can you put a B in it just before the T? What are you talking about? There's no B in debt. But it comes from Latin, debitum. And salmon, what about salmon? Put a silent L after the A. But with pharmacy, phantom, phlegm, philosophy, I want you to spell them with a PH and not an F because they come from Greek. Feta cheese too, like this. No, fuck. Fuck. P-H-U-C. Got it. From the 16th to the 19th century, biscuit was spelt phonetically as biscuit, like this, and then it got respelt in the 19th century as biscuit. Perfect had a silent C, but when people saw the respelled word on a page, they started pronouncing it. Sometimes the classical scholars got it wrong. They put a silent S in island, thinking that it came from the Latin insula, but it doesn't. It's from an unrelated Anglo-Saxon word. So lots of silent letters, as you see, and here are some more due to the over-enthusiastic adherence to etymology. From the perspective of the 21st century, it seems ridiculous, but during this period, the elites sent their male offspring to grammar schools where they would also have learnt Latin and French and possibly Greek too. So a knowledge of where English words came from would have helped them connect all the pieces of the linguistic puzzle. So there was a method in their madness, and that's why even now those who have studied Latin tend to be better spellers. I haven't studied Latin or ancient Greek, but if you have, then let us know in the comments if it helps your spelling. And what you've just seen explains why English has so many homonyms. We have blue like this and blue like this, so like this and like this, peace like this and like this, and here are a few more. It's pause for thought, isn't it? I asked if they had any plain bagels. They said no, only helicopter. And of course there have been many attempts over the years to overhaul English spelling and make it more phonetic, but they have never succeeded. Noah Webster, the American lexicographer, altered a number of words in American English. Famously, he changed colour like this to colour like this, and travel like this to traveller like this, plough like this to plough like this, and he changed centre to centre, switching around the R and the E, but logic would tell you that he should have changed the C to an S, but no, his changes were rather piecemeal and not as extensive as they could have been. So what do you think? Is it time for spelling reform? Let us know in the comments. And if you're interested in the history of the English language, then why not sign up to my newsletter? It's free, link in the description, or become a Patreon, wisdom guaranteed. That's all for now. Have a beautiful day. Bye.